Hey Gearheads, and welcome to GT Garage Talk. I am your host Cory, and this week on the podcast we have a very special guest, longtime friend, I guess I could say, fellow journalist, busy as can be. Oh my goodness, she stays incredibly busy between, TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, editing for Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, amongst many other things. And we will get into all of that with this week's guest, Jill Ciminillo. She, as I said, is also a journalist in the automotive space. I just want to take some time today to pick her brain about how she got here, what journey led her to being an automotive journalist, and what all does that entail in 2022. So without further ado, let's bring on Jill. Well, Jill, thank you so much for joining me. This has been a long time coming. You and I first met last spring at the Texas Auto Writers Auto Roundup, but good to have you on the podcast.
It's good to be here. Thanks for asking me.
Absolutely. I have really, especially after truly getting to know you, wanted to get you on the podcast because you are so high energy that I'm like, it's only a good thing for my listeners to get to know you and get to introduce you to my audience as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So you and I have several things in common. We'll start off with vehicles, most obvious, because that's where we are. You are involved in many different things. Most obvious, you work for Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, and you also do some freelance stuff yourself. Why don't you give our listeners maybe a little bit of background of what you got you into automotive and kind of a summation of where you are now?
Yeah, it's kind of a funny story because I am not a car person.
Okay. I couldn't tell that from any of what you do. So you played off well.
I suppose 20 years into it, you kind of become a car person after that. But I went to journalism school. I went to the University of Missouri. So Mizzou for anybody out there. And I went to the J school there, grad school. So I have my master's in journalism.
Nice.
My goal was actually to start a travel magazine. I wanted to get into magazine publishing. Way back in the Stone Ages when I was in journalism school, it was new media, and so I was learning how to build websites and, interactive things and, like HTML coding and all that cool stuff. Oh, yeah. So there was no WordPress. If you wanted a website, you had to code it yourself. And so, I wanted to create this travel magazine that was also a website, and left journalism school. And that didn't happen.
Spoiler warning.
Spoiler alert. And so I had a couple of jobs. One, I was working for my sorority in their communications department. And, that was kind of cool because I got to take everything that I learned in journalism school and basically revamp their entire communications department. So changed their software, redesigned their magazine, helped update their website. And so that part was cool. But after a year, it was like, I've done everything I can do here. What's next? And so I ended up moving, and that was based in Indianapolis. So I ended up moving to Chicago and had a couple of editorial assistant kind of jobs here, and didn't enjoy that too much.
Yeah.
But when I was at a weekly newspaper, the suburbs of Chicago, I was doing community guides. So you go out to the local suburb and you meet with them and you put all of the new information in. So it's like a welcome wagon kind of booklet that you give to people when you move in. Also not terribly interesting. But the guy so I was in the niche publishing department, and I always say when you're at a newspaper, at least the newspaper I was at, the niche publishing was code for SHIT that the union doesn't want to do.
Yes.
Because I was a non-union employee. And so anything they didn't want to do, they shoved in the niche publishing department. So community guides, that was niche publishing. Maps, that was niche publishing. Advertising, advertorial kind of stuff, that was niche publishing. But it also housed the automotive section, the fashion section, the real estate section, all of the special sections. And the automotive editor quit. So my boss pulls me into her office and was like, "Hey, Andrew quit." And I was like, all right. And she's like, do you want his job? And I like looked at her and I like looked over my shoulder. I'm like, is she talking to me? And I was just like, so I don't know anything about cars, right? She's like, yeah, that's fine. I just need you to edit the section, design the section. So I knew all the design software and editing and all that kind of stuff. And so she's like, I just need you to edit it, design it, make sure it gets out every week and that there aren't any swear words in there. And I was like, I could probably do that. When do you need my answer? She was like, basically, she like looked at her watch and she looked at me and she's like, before your butt leaves that chair. And I was like, oh, okay. And so I'm thinking, current title, marketing coordinator, new title, automotive editor, which is going to look better to you on a resume?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm like, automotive editor it is. So when I started out, I was just literally editing and designing the section and making sure it hit deadline. After about a year, I started to get bored. And so I was like, I bet I could write. So I went to my boss and I'm like, do you care if I start writing for this? And she's like, I'm not paying you anymore.
Like, gotta get that out of the way right now.
Yeah. She's like, I'm not paying you anymore, but if you want to start writing, have at it. So I was like, all right, I think I'm gonna start writing. So like went to the Chicago Auto Show and like wrote a couple of articles. About this time, Midwest Automotive Media Association figured out who I was and they invited me to attend some meetings. So I was like, all right, I'll attend a meeting. I was the only girl there.
Right.
Other than, actually, there was one other female there, and that was the PR person for Chrysler at the time.
Okay.
And otherwise, it was a completely male-dominated organization. And so I was just like, okay, this is interesting. I'm not intimidated at all. But I stuck with it and started writing more. Randomly, I also picked up, like in my role at Pioneer Press Newspapers, which is where I was, suburbs of Chicago. I also did like the fashion section. I did some of the special sections as well. So I was doing the fashion section and I was at the Nordstrom's in Northbrook, northern suburb of Chicago. And I'm walking through the foyer of the store and there's a Rolls Royce Phantom sitting in the lobby. And I'm just like kind of looking at it. And the woman who was in charge of the fashion department, she was like, so you also do car stuff, right? And I was like, yeah, I do. She's like, well, you've got to meet Vernon. And Vernon was the sales manager for Rolls Royce in Northbrook. I think he was the sales manager, but you got to meet Vernon. So I meet Vernon. And so he's telling me, oh, this is a really cool car, blah, 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 blah. And I'm thinking, yeah, this is a very cool car. And he's like, so do you want to feature it in your section? And I was like, okay, I can take a couple of pictures or whatever. And he's like, no. Would you like to come drive it? And I was like,
yes.
I'm like, no, but yes. And I'm thinking like, I'm right out of college basically at this point and I'm young and I'm thinking, oh man, this is like $100,000 car. Do I really want to drive this? And I know nothing about the Rolls Royce Phantom. So it's not $100,000 car. It's a $500,000 car. But thankfully I didn't know that before I drove it. So I was like, sure, I'll come drive it. And so I drove it, did some research on it when I learned that it was a $500,000 car. But that was my very first car review that I ever wrote was of that vehicle from a quick spin that I did with a dealer of this car. And it was really funny because so at the time in Chicago, there were two big, you have the Chicago Sun-Times and the Chicago Tribune. Okay. And you had Jim Matea, who worked for the Chicago Tribune, and you had Dan Jedlicka, who worked for the Chicago Sun-Times. And it was like they were constantly going head to head and competing with each other. The grand old days of having two newspapers and everybody competing with everybody. And the Vernon, he was like, by the way, I'm not offering this to Dan or Jim, so you will have an exclusive. And I was like, well, then yes, I'm totally doing that. So I wrote that article, put it in the paper, and the next mama meeting that I went to, one of the Ford PR people, his name was Scott Jensen, he came up to me and he was like, so you're clearly driving cars and writing. Do you want press vehicles? And I was like, okay, what does that mean? I'm thinking they'll give me a car for a couple of hours. I'll drive it, whatever. Right. And they're like, oh yeah. I'll have our fleet manager call you. We'll set you up with a vehicle for a week. And I was like, wait, what? And so, I mean, I just kind of stumbled into this.
That's awesome.
And it was a complete, I had no idea, what any of this was. And, then I was attending like the spring rally for Mama and there were a menagerie of cars to drive and off-road and on the racetrack, which again, by the way, didn't know what I was doing. So showed up to a racetrack in high heels. But, you learn, you live and you learn. I learned fast. And everybody at that time, I mean, even though I was the only female really in the area who was doing this, everybody was super kind and really helpful, trying to guide me. And I would, Tom Appel, who I do a podcast with, and Kirk Bell, who he works for Motor Authority now, but they both worked for Consumer Guide Automotive in Chicago at the time. And I approached them and I was like, I'm adopting you and I need you to help me. And they're like, okay. They're like, scary girl, what would you like from us? And I said, look, I'm new to this car thing. I need you to guide me. I would like you to read my stuff. I'd like you to tell me, do I sound like a 16-year-old girl when I'm writing? Because that's kind of how I feel.
Right.
So they kind of like, they critiqued my stuff. They really helped to guide me and kind of pointed me in the direction that I'm at now. And I found that, for the most part, especially the journalists in Chicago, as I was trying to find my way, because at the time, not only was I the only female, but I was far and away, like 20 years far and away, the youngest person who was writing about cars. So, it was an interesting time and a great time. I loved it. I loved learning something new. And I didn't necessarily think of myself as, oh, I'm a girl who's writing about cars. I'm like, I'm a new person who's writing about cars. How do I figure this out? So it was really great. And I was at Pioneer Press for 6 years, doing the automotive beat. Then I moved over to the Sun-Times. Dan Jedlicka was retiring. So I moved over there, took over the online automotive section and became the Sun-Times auto reporter. And then I was like, maybe I've done everything I can do in automotive. And this is like 7 years into it. I need to try something new. So I left automotive for a small window of time and went to a women's magazine as the editor-in-chief. It was a startup magazine. Discovered very quickly that I love writing about cars. And so after about 9 months, I was like, that's it. And I went back to automotive and started blogging for the Chicago Tribune at that point. Then, maintained that, started doing freelance work. And got a job working for a broadcast company as a digital editor. So the automotive stuff was kind of like my side work.
Right.
I didn't tell anybody at the company that I was working for that I was doing this car thing on the side. And I'd show up every day to work and I'd have a different car. And people would be like, lady, you got to tell us who you are and what you're doing. And so I was like, well, so here's the thing. In this other life that it has nothing to do with this life, I freelance about cars and I write about cars and I, do this blog and my boss was like, wait a minute. So you're telling me people pay you money to do Twitter and Facebook and blog and this social media stuff and they asked you to come drive like $400,000-$500,000 cars and drive them on a racetrack and you do that on the side? And I was like, I do. And he's like, I have you doing the wrong job.
Clearly.
Like, okay. And he's like, now we don't have space for you to do an automotive column here, but what I would like you to do is to teach. So the company I was working for was Barrington Broadcasting. It was a local small company in the suburbs of Chicago that owned 14 small to mid-market TV stations, NBC, ABC, CBS affiliates throughout the United States. He's like, what I need you to do is go to these stations and teach them how to use social media. How do you do your job, be a journalist, and post to Instagram, do a YouTube video, do this is the time before TikTok. So, but how to tweet, how to incorporate this. So I spent a couple years doing that, and I loved that because I got the best of both worlds. I got to, teach people something and then still do the automotive stuff because he's like, keep doing the automotive stuff. And he's like, I'll even give you time off to travel if you need to do that because you doing this gives us credibility that you're an active working journalist who's doing all this stuff at the same time. And I was like, all right. So I loved it. That was a lot of fun, but all good things must come to an end. We got bought by an even larger broadcast company. They had a social media director already, and they're like, okay, what else do you want to do? And I said, well, I have this automotive thing. And I said, in an ideal world, I'd create an automotive section for you. And they're like, okay, go do that. And I was like, wait, what? So I did. I created an automotive section for them, ran across 100 websites throughout the United States, I had a couple of TV stations that I worked with. So like the Detroit Auto Show, I did a broadcast version of like an automotive special with one of their TV anchors,
Wow.
and that was a lot of fun. So I did that for about 6 years again, maybe. But then again, you get to this point where it's like,
Yeah.
I've done everything I can do. What's next? And so that's kind of when I branched off into contract work and freelance work, and did some work with Auto Exotica and Jennifer Jansen. And now I'm working with Tim Esterdahl at Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. Automotive is my space. I'm not leaving it, unless I'm exiting automotive altogether, and I like am exiting journalism altogether, because I'm looking like, okay, when I'm, 60, 70, what am I doing? I don't know what that answer is yet, but maybe it'll have something to do with fitness or running or something. But yeah, so I'm here, I'm sticking around, and I love it. And I've done a whole bunch of different kinds of writing. Now I'm doing video and TikTok, and I'm evolving.
What a way to break on the scene, though, with a Rolls Royce and an exclusive at that. So, way to make a name for yourself, not only locally, but just throughout. I've gotten to drive one Rolls, and it was the Cullinan, and I was impressed. But same thing as you, it was at an off-road event, and they're talking about, do you want to take it off-road? And what?
What you talking about, Willis?
That car costs twice what my house does, and you want me to do what with it? So yeah, very interesting. Yeah. So you touched on being the only female in the room a lot. Mm-hmm. Very similar story. We've had on this podcast both Bogie Latiner from All Girls Garage and the legendary Sue Mead, who is at the Dakar rally right now, as we speak.
Literally as we speak, she's in Saudi Arabia.
And just hearing similar sentiments from both of them of how they were welcomed in and how they were treated just makes me feel good as a human being. That, you could get lost in the media, you could get lost in all the bad news, but hearing how people are welcomed in, and okay, come on, not only were you the only female in the room, you were the youngest in the room, and to just be taken in like that's an awesome story for me. That warms my heart. So yes, please, everyone share this episode. It is good news. There is still good news in this world, and that's really the whole purpose of this podcast, is getting to hear people's story, getting to know how you are where you are, because through your many outlets, you really don't get to share that. And so thank you for sharing that. And hopefully somebody will hear that and be like, you know what? I can do this, because I'm kind of prodding my wife right now. We're in a little bit of a pivot time on our YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. We're going to start doing more family reviews, and we have press vehicles coming. And the first one up is a Ford Maverick. And she's like, do I need to do any research? I was like, you do what you want to do. You be as green coming into this as you want, but I want your raw opinions. And so far, we've got a few family reviews out and getting very positive feedback that people like to hear her raw consumer insights of how she would approach a vehicle is pretty awesome as well. So, maybe I can use this episode to rope her in just a little bit more.
Definitely. And here's the thing, like throughout my career, like I've tried not to learn too much into the weeds on cars. Like I don't want to know about your gear ratios. I don't want to know that, because I write for a more general consumer, and I want to talk like people talk. Right. And so it's like, it's not, this has 500 horsepower, and I'm at a stoplight. There's a guy next to me who's trying to cut me off, and I'm going to win because there's enough power here.
Yes.
And so, that's what people really want to know. They want to know, are you going to beat the guy next to you who's trying to cut you off? Is there a place to put your purse? Is, how do you fit in the back seat? Are you hitting hard plastic? I mean, do you fit in the trunk?
I was going to say, we could not go past that. So...
so I have an alter ego, Girl in the Trunk. I am 1.5 cubic feet of cargo volume. On Instagram and Twitter, I have a profile there called Girl in the Trunk. And I don't feed it that often, but I try to do funny things there and take pictures of me in trunks or frunks. Or I think I've been in the Ram box. I've been in underfloor storage. of the Maverick. So I try to find funny spaces. I've been in the gear tunnel of the Rivian. So I try to find funny spaces and show how 1.5 cubic feet of cargo volume fits. And, you'll say it's 10 Ciminellos, 2 Ciminellos, whatever. There are never half Ciminellos. We do not cut the Ciminello in half. But I mean, throughout my entire career, I've tried to take a more consumeristic bent, and I've tried to have humor.
Yep.
Because if you can't laugh at it and you can't have fun with it, then why are you doing it?
Exactly.
Why are you doing it?
Yeah, you've inspired me. I have gotten in a couple. I'm like, all right, Jill does it. I'm considerably more passenger and cargo volume than you, and we'll just leave it at that.
You're more than 1.5?
Yes. Let's just say we could not close the frunk in a Porsche Cayman. My back just doesn't quite clear the low slung hood on that one. But believe it or not, I could fit quite well in the back of an '01 Ford Crown Victoria, but so could like 20 other people along with me.
Yeah.
So, you take what you can get. Small victories.
That would be true.
So, yes, I absolutely appreciate your content. And you alluded to it just a little bit ago. Perhaps one of your biggest platforms right now is, as I like to call it, the TikTok, the beast out there. We are yet to get on TikTok. My wife keeps pushing me. She's in the marketing space. So look out for a GT Garage Talk TikTok soon. What has been your experience? It seems like more and more people are jumping, like that is the new media. That is the HTML code. That is the new space to go. And you, again, seem to be at the forefront. Kind of share your experience there.
Yeah, so here's my theory on journalism. You can't just do one thing and survive. That is my theory. There are a lot of people who are like, I'm a writer. I'm only going to write. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not doing anything else. And I think in order to be a good journalist, and again, just my opinion, but in order to be a good journalist, you have to put your message where people are going to hear it.
Exactly.
And go figure. I mean, because you're saying something, and hopefully you're saying something important or interesting, and people aren't reading anymore. I write. I do reviews. I still do written reviews. Every product launch I go to, I do a written review, a YouTube review, and I do social media and TikTok. But my whole theory is you've got to keep evolving. You've got to find people where they are, and you have to put your message in front of people so they will see it. And right now, people are on TikTok, and it was kind of, I kept hearing about TikTok, and I'm like, I don't want to do TikTok. I don't want to do TikTok. I don't want to do TikTok.
I'm right there right now.
Yeah. And then I saw Connie Peters, who is amazing, do TikTok. And she's a Vancouver-based automotive journalist. And I started seeing her TikTok content showing up on Instagram. So I was like, dang it, I have to create an account. So I created an account. I just started watching her. And I was just like, well, that actually looks pretty easy, because she's not doing a formal review. Right. It's a snippet of something. And at the time she wasn't even really speaking. All she was doing was panning the video around the vehicle and just, walking around it, showing the inside and setting it to music. And that was it. And I was like, well, that's easy enough. I can do that. And so I started to do that. And somebody was like, and so here's the interesting thing. A lot of people say you shouldn't read the comments. But I found, especially on TikTok, that's not actually true. I mean, for every troll comment you get, you probably get 10 helpful or interesting comments.
Right.
And so I read every comment, and I try to like every comment, or if there's a response necessary, I try to respond to every comment. I can't get them all, but I try. So I started, as I'm reading my comments, and it's the middle of the pandemic, so people are looking for things to do. So I started to get followers pretty quickly. Right. And one of my commenters said, hey, you need to go follow Forrest Auto Reviews, and you need to start doing reviews like he does them. And, we want to see you. We want to hear you. You should start doing that. So I looked at Forrest, and he was like very energetic and very good. And I was like, okay. And so the very first video that I did like that was of the Nissan Kicks. And so I did the video, and then I tagged the guy who commented, and I was like this. And he goes, like that exactly. That's it exactly. He's like, do more of those. So what I try and do is kind of a mix of, I don't do any of the pan videos anymore where I'm
Right.
just walking around. I usually do the one video that I do that's standard for every vehicle that I drive is I just start the car. And if there's like an animation screen or the beeping of the welcome chimes, whatever, that's it. And all I say is, do you have any video requests or things you want to know about this vehicle? Comment below. And so then that's how I cover that
Nice.
vehicle. So I just had the Jeep Grand Wagoneer, and people are like, well, show me the cargo space. What about the parallel park feature? What about the perpendicular park feature? What about this? What about that? And so then when I'm capturing the video, I try to answer those questions specifically. And then I also do things that I like video and the things that I don't like video. So any vehicle that I have, no matter how much I love it, I'm going to do a video about, things that I don't like on it,
Right.
because there's always at least one of those things that you don't like. And it could be like the paint color. I don't know. But so I've been having a lot of fun with it. And I read the comments, and I found that people give me really good story ideas. And because they're asking questions
Right.
that I don't think about anymore. I've been doing this for 20 years.
Right.
Like, even as much as I try not to learn and I'm trying to be a general consumer, I'm no longer a general consumer.
Yeah.
I'm just not. I've seen too much, I've driven too much, I know too much. And so reading these comments, so for example, I did a TikTok on the Ford F-150 hybrid when it first came out, the Power Boost. And I was showing the plugs in the back, the Pro Power on board.
Right.
I got a whole bunch of comments that were like, well, my Tundra does that. And I'm like, no, your Tundra doesn't
Nope.
do that. And they're like, well, my Chevy's had a plug back there for 10 years. This is old stuff. And I'm like, no, it's not old stuff. And they're like, well, this is just an inverter. It's just a generator. It's just this. It's just that. And this isn't special. This is nothing new. And so like I took all of the comments or the questions that were kind of like, no, this is wrong. I know this is wrong, but you're not going to listen to me. And I took them out and I made a list and I sent them over to Ford, Don McKenzie over at Ford. And I'm like, do you have somebody who can I would like to do a Q&A. I would just like for somebody to answer these questions. I'm not going to edit it. Maybe I'll edit for grammar, but I'm not going to change any of the content of, the answer. I'll do an intro saying I got these questions on TikTok, and then I'm just going to do QA. I'm like, do you have somebody who can do that for me? And she was like, yep, I will find an engineer. And so the guy who responded was amazing, answered all of the questions perfectly. And I posted it on Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. And that remains one of our most viewed stories and most commented stories. And so it's, just kind of listening to themes. And so I have another story I need to write right now, because I drove the Hyundai Ioniq in San Diego, so warm weather. But I have a lot of followers who are not in San Diego in warm weather, and they're like, well, what happens if it's cold outside? Well, what happens if this happens? What happens if that? And I was like, these are questions I did not think to ask. So I need to go back through that video that I did on the Ioniq and gather those questions and go back to Hyundai and then do another story. Because again, like, here are people who aren't in my head.
Right.
They don't know what I know. And so they're asking amazing questions, and I love it. It's great. So I've enjoyed TikTok. I've really learned a lot through TikTok, and I feel like I'm becoming, in a way, a better journalist because of TikTok.
That's awesome. So
yeah,
that kind of helps pivot into, you mentioned it, the trolls. I know from being friends with you on social media, you get some good ones. I've had my fair share, but how would you feel the world is out there in the comments section? You kind of mentioned the ratio being more positive than negative. What's been your experience out there?
It's funny because I get more trolls on YouTube than I do on TikTok, which surprised me. But the thing that I found about TikTok is, because I'm very engaged with my followers and I, respond to people and I try to have conversations with people, when a troll comes in, my followers go in and they're like, you're stupid, go away. And I'm just like, so I don't even have to. And
Nice.
So I don't get a lot of the troll comments on TikTok because my followers take care of it. So I love it. They're amazing. On YouTube, I do, because I approach my and I'm still relatively nascent in my like, I've had a YouTube channel for probably 15 years,
Yeah.
but I didn't know what to do with it. You know, I had a YouTube channel when YouTube was created because
Yes.
I was like, I just need to know what's going on here.
Right.
But I never really did much with it. I post, like, if you go back and if you look at my channel and you look at some of the original videos that I did, I mean, they are so horrible. They're funny. And I'm like, should I take those off? And I'm like, no,
Nope.
I'm leaving them on. It's an evolution. It's fine. And so so I'm just starting to really try and pay attention because I've been doing a lot of YouTube with Tim.
Right.
And I've been on his pickup truck talk channel. So I've been trying to focus on my own channel as well. And I only have about 1,500 subscribers right now. So a lot of times people will find me who are not following me and they don't know me.
Right.
And those are the people, and I approach it differently because I'm like, okay, by the time you get to me, somebody who only has 1,500 subscribers, you've seen every other effing video on blank.
Right.
You know, you know what the specs are, you know what the horsepower is, you've seen some dude do a burnout, you know, you've seen all of that. Why do I want to repeat that? That's just more of the same. So I try to, again, take more of a consumer focus, a consumer bent. And I talk about the things that I like and the things that I don't like, you know, the stuff that bothers me, the stuff that doesn't bother me. And I am trying to look at it like somebody who would be buying this car. And so very often I will get comments like, oh, well, you don't know how to drive because you're not driving the car while you're doing the video. And I'm like, I've got 2 fingers for you and they're not my thumb.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But, you know, so I get those kind of comments. I had one guy tell me that I dressed badly or that I looked sloppy, that I didn't look, and I was like in jeans. I had tennis shoes on and I had a nice black top on. And I was like, what about this? I posted the picture to my Facebook page because I was like, okay, people, you gotta be honest and you gotta tell me what's wrong with this outfit. And so I still don't I think it was the shoes, actually. I think people, the person who commented was put off by my shoes because they were pink.
Oh,
woo,
goodness.
Pink. But yeah, so I think girls get a lot more comments about how they're dressed, how they look. I had a white tank top on in a video that I did for Tim. And somebody said, oh, I didn't know in America that it was okay for women to wear wife beater shirts. And I was like,
what?
Really, dude? And so I like commented back and I was like, first off, this isn't that shirt. It's actually a white sweater tank.
Right.
But second, since I'm a girl, wouldn't that be a husband beater?
Yes.
But I've started getting sassy with some of these trolls.
Yeah, my standard MO for dealing with those, first of all, I laugh because you and I are both in the YouTube channel building stage where we need the help. And the algorithm feeds on comments. So I'm like,
they do.
You're actually helping me. So first off, thank you. And then I generally, if I live by the rule, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. I try to anyway. And so I generally reply with some funny, crazy, stupid emoji. I'm like, all right, if I can't say anything with words, what can I say with emoji to at least get that, you know, help boost that algorithm just a little bit more? But there was actually a point, there was quite a back and forth with one where they were basically calling me out for not knowing anything about the vehicle. And I took screenshots from the website and said, clearly you're wrong. You know, this is what I was told. This is the information that's out there. And by the way, I was actually in the vehicle. So, you know, there's all that. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, well, you know what? You're just helping me out. So thank you very much and be on your way. So yeah, the internet is a fun and crazy place. We'll just leave it at that.
Well, that's actually really good. I might steal that response because I got into a bit of a back and forth with a guy on, I can't even remember which video it was, but it was the Hyundai Elantra N, and he said that I was very unprepared and didn't know what I was talking about, and I was just like, literally, I'm just doing I had the N and the N line sitting next to each other, and I was like, this is the difference between visual differences. These are the visual differences between these vehicles. That's all I was doing. and I hadn't even driven the vehicle yet. It was
Right.
just a walk around that I posted. And he was like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. And I'm like, dude, I don't know what else you want from me. And he was like, well, just look like you know what you're talking about. And I'm like, so we went back and forth, and finally he like said something else. And I'm like, you know what, dude, this is not the channel for you. Thank you for stopping by.
Yes.
Have a nice day. And I think that's how I ended it, was have a nice day. This is not the channel for you. Go away.
Be on your way, good sir.
Yeah.
Well, so let's pivot just a little bit away from the negativity of the internet world and talk about the other thing you and I have in common, and that is the world of running, the wonderful world of
Yes.
running and fitness. And you have recently, I'm trying to remember how recent it was, did a half marathon, did you not?
I did.
And that was
Yeah.
the Chicago, or no?
No, so it's kind of funny because I'm a runner, and I'm always posting my running photos out on Facebook and stuff like that. Everybody in the industry knows that I'm a runner.
Right.
And I created a Facebook group for automotive industry people who are also runners so that we know who each other are. But last summer, the group wasn't that big yet. It's growing, and I love it. But Toyota actually sponsors or hosts, the sponsors, I guess is the right word, the Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota.
Okay.
They had entries to that, and even though our runners group is a lot of people who run, I think me and James Bell are probably the only ones. Oh, and Jake Fisher, who and maybe Jamie Butters, but like, so we're some of the only ones who do endurance,
Right.
like marathons and half marathons. And so the one of the Toyota PR people reached out to me, and they're like, I know you're an endurance athlete. We have entries to the Grandma's Marathon in Duluth, Minnesota. Would you like it? And I was like, no, but yes. It's a typical answer.
Right.
I don't, but I do. So I looked, and I was like, I don't know that because she reached out to me, I want to say it was like March, and the marathon was in June. And I'm like, I don't think I could get up to marathon training in that short amount of time. But I looked on the website, and they had a half marathon. I was like, so can I do the half marathon instead? And she's like, yeah, absolutely, whatever. And so they hosted me to go and do this half marathon. It was so much fun. I've never traveled to do a half marathon before. I've always just done Chicago.
Right.
So I've done the Chicago Marathon 11 times. I've done the Rock and Roll Half Marathon. But I've never traveled to run, because anybody who's an endurance runner, you have your routine,
Right.
the things that you eat the night before you run, how you sleep, what you eat the morning of, and doing it in your house is stressful enough to take that on the road and do it in a hotel. I was like, I just don't think I can do that. But once you've done a marathon, I know this sounds silly, 13 miles is nothing. Like, I haven't run in a month, and I could probably wake up tomorrow and do 13 miles because I know how to pace myself.
Right.
And I haven't run in a month because it's too flipping cold in Chicago right now.
Yes.
But yeah, so I did the half marathon, traveled, and discovered, okay, half marathon is doable. As long as I don't go crazy with my food the night before, I drink a lot of water. And then, I brought my own breakfast because I didn't want to trust that to anybody else. And I do, there's a brand out there, it's called Ezekiel. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. They do like bread, and it's frozen, and it's like sprouted grain.
Yes.
So I brought I toasted in Chicago my bread and put it in a baggie, and then brought it with me. And I do that with almond butter.
Okay.
And then I put a little bit of honey, and then I use base salt. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's like an electrolyte salt.
Okay.
And so I put all that on top of the Ezekiel bread, and that's what I eat before I run endurance. And brought my gels and all that kind of stuff with me, and my own water, because at the time, so this is still pandemic times too, and this was one of the first endurance races coming out of the pandemic. So they weren't even sure that they were going to have water stations.
Oh boy.
So they told us to bring our own water bottle, and they're like, we'll have a way for you to refill your water bottle, because we don't expect you to have enough water, unless you wear Camelback or something like that for 13 miles. So they were like, we'll have a way for you to refill, but we may not have water stations. So they did have water stations, so it was fine. But yeah. So it was fun. And I'm like, now I want to do travel. I want to do
Yes.
travel half marathons. I don't know that I want to do a travel marathon, but I want to do travel half marathons.
Yeah, so my wife, who is in the travel industry, has always told me, she's like, if you're going to do a big run, let's travel somewhere. Let's go someplace fun. Because all the ones I was bringing to her weren't like the most exotic, the most fun locations. Here in Texas, there is. So I went to Louisville, Kentucky for a youth trip. And every morning I got up and I ran across the river, which, being a Texan, being able to travel on foot to another state and back just blew my mind,
Right.
all by itself. And I fell in love with running over bridges. It is the coolest thing, both literally and figuratively, because
Right.
the temperature drops as you get over the water. It's just an amazing view. You actually get the time to enjoy it versus being in a car. Just so much I love about it. So here in Texas, there is they call it the Texas Bridge Series, and it's 2 10Ks and a half marathon. And they're all based in the area I grew up down in the coast, the Houston area. There's one in Kemah, one in Galveston, and then one in LaPorte, which is literally where I grew up. And I'm like, man, I want to do that. But I've only done one half marathon in my entire life. And it is in my now current neighborhood, which I've done the research. The highest point in the city is actually in my current neighborhood. So I went from being basically training on flat land where I lived previously to now I'm in the hills of East Texas. And I can run a 5K with more positive elevation than the 15K that is hosted here in town that I've done like 3 or 4 times. And I'm like, that's insane to me. And the half marathon I did, like I said, ended in this neighborhood. And like the last, I want to say half mile, felt like it was all uphill. And it was sponsored by a local fitness company who has a bicycle group. And one of the guys saw me as I was slowing down, and he rides up next to me. He's like, come on, you can do it. I made this course. I'm like, you made this course? You're the one that I need to be mad at. Why is the last stretch all uphill? It's just, it was frustrating, but I loved it. There's a certain type of crazy that you have to be to do endurance running. And I miss it. I miss it so much. Ever since my now almost 4-year-old was born, I have lost my routine and I've struggled to find it. And then quitting my corporate job, I've only lost it more. So if you can find a hobby, this is for everyone. If you can find a hobby that you love, or if you're looking for something, try running. It's a good one. I frequently say it's my therapy, but the group you mentioned has been just so welcoming, and I'm so grateful that I was invited to it. I've met some great people through it, and just very encouraging as I'm trying my hardest to get into some sort of routine. And as I told you before I hit record, I'm probably going out after this and enjoying the afternoon as much as I can.
Yeah, lucky you. I will not be running for another 2 months in Chicago because it's going to be like 0 degrees upon 0 degrees upon 0 degrees for the next 2 months. What for anybody who is looking at endurance running or looking at creating a program, I would say find your local running group.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of directors for the Chicago Area Runners Association, and there are a lot of running groups in Chicago, but I love Kara because they do marathon training in the summer. And that's how I found them, is doing my first marathon. I trained with them. And I was actually running for a charity, and the charity signed me up with Kara. And 15 years later, I'm still there. And the best thing about like finding a local running group or doing a training program with a group is you get the training program. And so like the first week of marathon training looks like this. Tuesday you run 3 miles, Wednesday you run 3 miles, Thursday you run 3 miles, Saturday you run 6 miles. Yeah. The next week is you run 3 miles, 3 miles, 3 miles, 7 miles. Then you do like 3 miles, 4 miles, 3 miles, 5 miles. So you have a cutback week. So as you're going through this training, but then you go up the next Saturday, you're running 9 miles. So that in order to jump from 5 miles to 9 miles, you have to get all of your midweek runs in.
Right.
So to me, I found that is really super, that's super helpful in trying to get your routine down, because you don't have a choice. You have to get your runs in, or else you're not going to be able to hit that next hurdle that you have to hit. And so like when I'm traveling, like marathon training is amazing, because like I'll know my day is scheduled from 9 a.m. until 10 p.m. And then I'm like, all right, the only time I'm going to have to run today is at 5 a.m. I'm going to get up and I'm going to get on a treadmill at 5 a.m. and I'm going to go for a run.
Oh, those are two things I cannot stand. Early morning runs and the treadmill. No, thank you. No, thank you. No, thank you.
No, but if you're signed up for something, if you're training, you have no choice. And so it forces you to do it. So that is the one thing I would recommend in terms of like routine. If that's what you need, like that is super helpful. Signing up for a race, getting the program and sticking to the program.
Yeah. And I've told my wife that a couple of times. I'm like, I just need to find a race that I want to do that is either here local or someplace that we're going to be. Because now with my job, I travel. With her job, we travel. And I'm like, I just need to find a race to motivate me, because if I pay for it, I'm going to do it. If I'm going to do it, I'm not going to kill myself doing it. So yeah, that's basically where I need to be. So, all right. Well, it has been a blast talking cars with you. But to close out this interview, I have got 8 questions, because every proper vehicle in my mind should have 8 cylinders. And we call them random misfire questions. They are this or that, yes or no, fun, just jovial questions to help our audience get to know you just a little bit better. I've got a list I will pick from, and let's see. We'll start off easy. I know. So I know you're probably like most journalists in the space, especially having done it as long as you have. You probably have not had a personal vehicle that you rotate through many press vehicles. So having one that is like yours may not be as big a thing, but do you name your personal vehicles?
Oh, I did. So right now my husband and I share a vehicle, and I did not name that because it's more his than mine. Right. But the last car that I had was a green Saturn SC1, and her name was Harriet.
Nice. I appreciate that on multiple levels. So we've actually interviewed the last employee of the Saturn brand. In fact, he was last week's guest. So
I love Saturn.
And that is... So the first time we spoke with him was very focused on the Saturn brand. And he said that is the thing he learned very quickly about Saturn, is that they truly were like the Apple, the think different of the auto industry. And what did them in is when that got removed from their DNA and they were badge engineered, and then they weren't. So, all right. Here's a fun one. Manual or automatic?
Oh, manual. That's easy.
Oh, yes. So I recently, talking YouTube comments, just had a little bit of a back and forth with someone because at the LA Auto Show, they had a Camaro LT1 with a 6-speed there. And that is the cheapest V8 performance car you can get in America right now. And we were just praising the fact that it actually had a manual sitting there on the show floor. And then I came back and drove one with the 10-speed automatic. And the conversation was, well, you think it's better. Well, you think it's better. And I'm like, just drive one. Just drive one. There's just so much engagement, and you feel part of the process instead of riding along. So I appreciate it.
Our car that we share is a Volkswagen GTI with a manual.
Nice.
Yep.
All right. So pivoting just a little bit, but staying in the transmission realm, continuously variable or EV, which, let's face it, basically has.
An electronic continuously variable transmission. EV.
Yeah. Where are you on the whole EV spectrum of love it, hate it, somewhere in between. You recently drove the Ioniq 5.
I mean, I love the instantaneous torque.
Yes.
I love, and the Ioniq 5 itself is really amazingly well done vehicle. Handles very well on curves and corners, and it's the ride and handling is very good. So I like the idea of EVs, and yeah, I'm gonna miss that visceral feel of an engine. You can feel it through your foot and the pedal, like when you're driving, you can just feel it coming through the floorboards. I'll miss it. But I understand that the world is changing, and it's like my theory on journalism. Things change, and you have to change with it or you die. And so, the world is changing. We have to evolve. We have to move forward. We have to change. But in terms of EVs, like, I'm not convinced that's the end game. I'm not convinced that's the solution.
Same here.
I'm a fan of hydrogen. Yeah. And I would like to see people invest more in that and talk more about that.
And you recently drove the Toyota Mirai, which is their hydrogen fuel cell. So.
I did. Yeah, I had I was at a Toyota event last year. It feels so weird to say that.
Yeah.
Last month, basically. But I was at a Toyota event, and they had all of their vehicles available to drive, and so I was able to drive the Mirai, which it's not available in Chicago because there are no fuel cells in Chicago. Right. And so it was my first time ever having the opportunity, and I loved it. I thought it was a great car, and I think we need more of those.
Yep. More tech in cars or less tech?
Define tech.
It could be anything from the lane keep to rev match to traction control, or Apple CarPlay.
Well done, tech. I would say give me all of it.
Right.
Wireless Apple CarPlay, yes. Wired in CarPlay, meh.
Yep.
Lane keep assist and automatic emergency braking that's going to make sure that I don't get killed when somebody, decides to do something stupid in front of me. Yay. I'm driving the Jeep Compass right now, and it has this the whatever the sensors are way too sensitive. And yes. I mean, I drive in Chicago. I'm a very aggressive driver. If somebody is still in front of you, but they're turning and they're turning, you're going to kind of speed up to pass them. Well, the car is slamming on the brakes, even though you're gearing up to pass them. And it's just you were going to get me into an accident. So tech that is poorly done, or that it and I had the Subaru Outback that did something similar to me, that was braking when I was trying to pass. And, so tech that is poorly done, or that is,
half-baked.
Yeah, that is a problem. But stuff that is well done, that's seamless, that you barely it only is there when you need it, a thumbs up.
It's interesting that you bring up the Compass, because we drive, our main car in this household is a 2014 Jeep Cherokee, so slightly bigger than the Compass, but older tech. And my wife said she will kill me if I ever turn on the automatic braking again, because she had a very similar situation in high traffic, and she said she almost got rear-ended. And she said, never again, never turn this button on.
Yeah.
So it's interesting that they haven't fixed that in, 7 years now?
Well, this is the first vehicle that I've really seen it in. So I had the Jeep Wagoneer the previous week and didn't have a single problem with it. Drove the way I drive in the city of Chicago. The first time I got behind the wheel of the Compass, it was like, beep, 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 and I can't get into the car without it squawking at me. And I'm just like, okay, I'm going to have to, and I've only had it for a couple days, a couple days. So I need to spend some time with it and figure out how to turn that off, because that would drive me bonkers. And it is driving me bonkers. But that is, it's way too sensitive. Yes. It's way too squawky. On the way home, literally I'm slow. I have my foot on the brake pedal. I'm slowing down, and the car in front of me is slowing down at the same rate. And the vehicle is like, brake, 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 brake. And I'm just like, what am I doing wrong here? I'm doing nothing wrong.
Well, My wife will very much appreciate that she is not
Yeah.
alone in that fight. And it's my theory. I've not tested it out because I don't want to turn that button back on and forget. But it is my theory that it is somehow tied to the radar adaptive cruise control and the follow distance you have set. But again, I have not tested it out. Do not want to. It is not worth it for me to find that
No,
one
it is not. But I mean, a lot of vehicles are tied to that, and they don't do what this vehicle does.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have driven lots of vehicles. Lots.
Yes.
What has been, I don't want to say favorite, maybe most memorable. We'll phrase it that way.
Well, let's see. Other than that Phantom, which was the very
Right.
first car that I drove, most memorable. I mean, the most memorable ones are always the ones that are not a car I would ever own because they cost more than my house.
Right.
But any of the Aston Martins,
Okay.
those are like, I love Aston Martin because of the attention to detail that goes into it. I remember being on a program once, and I was talking to the product specialist, and we were talking, and we were going over the stitching in the vehicle, and I was just like, oh my God, this is so pretty. And he's like, yeah, and the person who stitched this was left-handed, right? And I was like, what? But it's like hand stitched, and he was like, yeah, once you see the difference between somebody who's right-handed and left-handed and how they stitch, you can look at a car and tell that the seamstress was right-handed or left-handed. And he was like, this person was left-handed. And but the attention to detail, the hand stitching, I feel like there was one vehicle that I drove that had the paint with the glass fragments in it. And I feel like they said it took 360 hours to paint it. And so it's just like just that level of detail, and I mean, everything about those cars are amazing. I'm so sad I haven't driven the DBX yet.
Yeah.
I think I would love it. But the sports cars I've driven, and with like the embossing and the bezels and the stitching, and I don't know if you've ever been on an Aston Martin configurator, but there are probably 3 million ways you can configure one single car, because you can have the paint color be one thing, the seats be something, and then you have I forget what they call it, but the little circle underneath the, like, being a different color, and the stitching being a color, and then you could have inlays, and I mean, all of the intricate details that you can choose right down to the minute, like, I want this stitching to be this color and this, detail to be that. I mean, phenomenal. Those, I would say anything Aston Martin are going to be the most memorable.
Okay. On road or off?
I'm becoming more of an off-road girl.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know we were recently both at the Texas Auto Riders Truck Rodeo, and you had a lot of fun out there. You and Tim, your personalities play so well off of one another. I'll just say that.
They really do.
So that's awesome. I like that. So that pivots into the last two either or questions. Okay. Wrangler or Bronco?
That's a tough one. Oh, yeah, you're kind of getting me on this one. I'm gonna say Bronco, because it's the newest, neatest. I haven't had enough of it yet.
Right.
Vehicle.
I will take this moment to remind you there are no wrong answers to any of these questions.
I know, but it's so hard because I love the Wrangler. I love like the Easter eggs that they put on there. I love and Jeep has kind of perfected that vehicle, so you don't have a leaking roof.
Right.
You don't have some of the production and quality issues that you're currently seeing on the Bronco. Right. They've perfected it. But the Bronco is just, there's something special about that, and the newness is kind of that's why I would.
All right, final one. TRX or Raptor?
TRX.
That was a little less teeth pulling there.
That's easy. Launch control, You've got it fits through a small drive-through in Chicago. Does not fit in my garage, but neither would the Raptor. But no, the TRX is just a cool vehicle.
Absolutely.
It's cool. And again, the Easter eggs, it's cool. The Raptor is okay.
What's killing me is it's similar to what happened when the Raptor first came out. So Ford rolled that out. It was just the extended cab with the short bed on it. It was a purpose-built vehicle for Baja racing. They didn't expect it to last, and people kept buying them and buying them and buying them and buying them, and it created a market. And they popped up everywhere. We're in Texas. We're in the pickup truck capital of the world. They're everywhere down here. And I am surprised at how many TRXs are on the road. I can see at least one a week, if not multiple a week. And they're different ones. It's not the same one over and over. So I think Stellantis Ram found a winning formula. And it'll be interesting to see, going back to the EV debate, how they pivot from here. So very interesting and insightful. So, well, Jill, that brings us to the end of our regular episode. I thank you so much for joining me today and talking everything from history to automotive to running to fashion and pretty much everything in between. Thank you so much. Why don't you let our audience know exactly where they can find your work?
Right. So pickuptrucktalk.com, that's where most of my written stuff goes. I have a podcast with Consumer Guide Automotive folks. So search for the Consumer Guide Automotive Car Stuff podcast. I have a podcast with Tim with Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk. And then in terms of social media, I am on Twitter, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok, and I have a YouTube channel, and they are all under my name, Jill Ciminillo, and I use the hashtag car du jour because I'm talking about the car that I'm driving today.
And we will link all of that in the show description for you, so you'll make it really easy to find. But Jill, thank you so much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Huge thanks to Jill for coming on this week. I am incredibly grateful. I've wanted to bring her on for a while and just trying to organize and orchestrate everything. Now was a perfect opportunity. Great just to catch up with her over the airwaves. Great to talk a little bit of running with her, and great to actually get to hear her story. So many times I meet so many great people, and we know what each other do. We know everybody's channel, but we don't know what led them here and what path they took to get here. And hers was a very interesting story. Basically, I don't want to say falling into, but happening upon the automotive industry, and she just can't get away now. So, as we mentioned, all of the links to her different channels, everything she's involved in, will be found in the description of this podcast, so you can check it out there. Go and give her a follow. Go give her a subscribe on her podcasts, her YouTube channel, and TikTok. If you're on the TikTok, just go out and show her some love. Let her know that we sent you. But as always, we are just incredibly grateful for each and every one of you. You know where to find us on Facebook and Instagram, both at GT Garage Talk. Who knows, maybe TikTok soon. Everything that we do, including a link to our YouTube channel, is at gtgaragetalk.com. Until next time, bye.